Front and Center. Front and Center. A focus on important and significant developments affecting the lives of Filipinos, not only in the Philippines, but also those living and working around the world. Join us in Front and Center. Front and Center. Here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service.
Front and Center, a program that focuses on developments in the Philippines, legislation that provides policies and directions that strives to promote a better economy for the country, issues that concerns the welfare and well-being of every Filipino. All of this and more will be Front and Center. Join me in this half-hour program here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service. You can watch this program over Radyo Pilipinas World Service via Facebook page live broadcast. Just access our Facebook page, Radyo Pilipinas World Service. You can also catch every Front and Center programs over our YouTube channel. Just type in your YouTube browser, Radyo Pilipinas World Service. The program Front and Center and the programs of Radyo Pilipinas World Service can also be listened to the following shortwave frequencies: 12.010 MHz, 15.640 MHz, and 17.820 MHz. So come and join us for another edition of Front and Center. I am your host, Rey Sampang. Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. took a 2-day state visit to Australia from February 28 to 29 upon the invitation of Australian Governor-General David Hurley. The Philippine President referred to the visit as a significant step in realizing the opportunities and potentials set forth under the framework of the strategic partnership between the Philippines and Australia. The Philippines elevated its bilateral relations with Australia from comprehensive to a strategic partnership during the visit of Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese to the Philippines in September last year. During his visit, President Marcos addressed the Australian Parliament where he highlighted the Philippines' steadfast support for regional peace and harmony. Likewise, the Philippine Chief Executive personally thanked Australia for its unwavering support to the Philippines over its maritime claims in the South China Sea. In his address, the Philippine Chief Executive relayed to the Parliament of Australia that President Marcos commended Australia for abiding and sharing the same interest in keeping the seas free and open. He stressed the protection of South China Sea is vital as it is the critical global artery, crucial to the preservation of regional and global peace. He also admired Australia for upholding, defending, and preserving the unified and universal character of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, as the Constitution of the Ocean. The Chief Executive said the Philippines will remain firm in defending the country's sovereignty, sovereign rights, and jurisdiction, even in the challenging situation with Chinese maritime assets in the region. But before leaving for Canberra on Wednesday, President Marcos cited the presence of the Chinese Navy supporting the Chinese Coast Guard ships in the West Philippine Sea and actively jamming the communications of Filipino vessels in the area. Let us listen to the speech of President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. at Australia's Chamber of the House of Representatives in Canberra.
The First Lady and I are delighted to be in Canberra. We are grateful to Governor-General David Hurley for his invitation to us as guests of government. As President of a proud and free country, few other honors surpass this opportunity to address one of democracy's most august institutions, the Parliament of Australia. The long-standing friendship between our two great nations transcends the 78 years of our formal diplomatic relations. It is anchored on deep bonds of mutual respect and fond affection, which find concrete expression today in the rich contributions of more than 400,000 Filipinos to Australia, comprising the fifth largest migrant community in your country today. These bonds trace their roots as far back as the 1860s, when Filipino pearl divers, known to you then as the Manila Men, found their way to your shores as early purveyors of globalization. These Manila Men contributed to the Australian economy they enriched Australian life, and most importantly, they sparked meaningful connections that have endured through generations. When our two nations faced common danger in 1942, Filipino soldiers fought valiantly in Bataan and Corregidor. They faced the impossible task of holding back the enemy's advance, and yet we did. These efforts helped keep Australia safe, and in return, a grateful Australian people provided temporary refuge for the wartime Filipino leadership. And at the most crucial moment, Australian airmen, sailors, and soldiers fought side by side with Filipinos as we, together with our allies, turned the tide of war. Just as Filipinos lost lives to keep Australians safe at the onset of war, so did Australians offer their lives to restore freedom in the Philippines at the dawn of peace. As allies, we engaged actively in shaping the free world's vision for the post-war order. We worked to ensure that the new peace would respect the rights of all nations. As founding members of the United Nations, we turned that vision into reality. From the very beginning, we knew that our interests were intertwined. The security of Australia is bound with the security of the Philippines. When my father accompanied Prime Minister Whitlam on a sentimental tour of Bataan and Corregidor in 1974, they reaffirmed that core principle. When I signed our strategic partnership with Prime Minister Albanese last September, we marked a milestone in our deliberate and steady effort to build opportunities for our peoples while contributing to regional peace. All of these further affirm what our two peoples have already forged through many centuries. I look back on our shared history to contextualize the role that our respective nations played and continue today to play at this watershed moment. Geopolitical polarities and strategic competitions threaten our hard-won peace, even as we remain beset by unresolved inequities and inequalities within and amongst nations. Powerful and transformative technologies can destabilize our political and social order. Climate change threatens our very existence. These tectonic shifts are acutely felt in the Indo-Pacific. It has become crucial for us now to envision the shape, breadth, and the depth of our strategic partnership and how it must move forward as we weather the storms of global volatility. I see the way forward in building on the strong ties that have already been established between our citizens, between our economies, between our governments. Today, we add a further dimension to that relationship as we address concerns on our security and defense. We are called upon once again to join forces, together with our partners, in the face of threats to the rule of law, to stability, and to peace. For the Philippines, Australia plays a crucial role as one of only two partners with which the Philippines has a visiting forces agreement. In August of last year, I witnessed Exercise Alon, our bilateral amphibious activity involving 560 Filipino soldiers, 1,200 Australian servicemen, and 120 U.S. Marines. Last November, we welcomed the inaugural maritime cooperative activity between Armed Forces of the Philippines and the Australian Defence Force in the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. Let this just be the beginning. Your leaders have always taken the position that the destiny of Australia is irrevocably linked to the destiny of Asia. Over the years, you have held true to this tenet. You have become a valuable member of Asia and of the Indo-Pacific community. Our two countries have always understood that without the predictability and stability of our rules-based order, our region would not have emerged as a driver of the global economy as it is today. We have long known that our prosperity and development are anchored on the peace and stability of the Indo-Pacific. Today, that peace, that stability, and our continued success have come under threat. Once again, we must come together as partners to face the common challenges confronting the region. Not one single country can do this by itself. No single force can counter them by themselves. This is why our strategic partnership has grown more important than ever. We must reinforce each other's strengths. We must protect the peace that we fought for during the war and have jealously guarded in the decades since. We must oppose actions that clearly denigrate the rule of law. As in 1942, the Philippines now finds itself on the front line against actions that undermine regional peace, erode regional stability, and threaten regional success. Then as now, we remain firm in defending our sovereignty, our sovereign rights, our jurisdiction. I shall never tire of repeating the declaration that I made from the first day that I took office. I will not allow any attempt by any foreign power to take even 1 square inch of our sovereign territory. The challenges that we face may be formidable, but equally formidable is our resolve. We will not yield. Then as now, the security and continued prosperity of the region of countries like Australia relies upon that effort. Just as we fought to build our rules-based international order, so are we now fighting to protect it. The protection of the South China Sea as a vital, critical global artery is crucial to the preservation of regional peace and, I dare say, of global peace. We have an abiding interest in keeping our seas free and open and in ensuring unimpeded passage and freedom of navigation. We must uphold, preserve, and defend the unified and universal character of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea as the constitution of the oceans. We draw strength from the consistent and unequivocal support of Australia and the international community for the lawful exercise of our rights, which have been settled under international law. And so, on behalf of the Filipino people, I thank you, Australia, for standing with the Republic of the Philippines. Ladies and gentlemen, we demonstrate the depth and breadth of our security cooperation through regular exchanges between our armed forces and our coast guards, including in the areas of maritime security, counterterrorism, humanitarian assistance, and disaster relief. We collaborate to strengthen and seek new business links, to bolster our economic security, and to develop responses to economic coercion. We work together to promote and enhance the flow of environmentally sustainable investment and to explore cooperation on mineral resources development and climate and energy transition, amongst others. Indeed, we have made good progress since we signed our strategic partnership last year. Ultimately, our partnership finds its anchor in our common commitment to ensuring that this region keeps to the path of peace, builds resilience, remains focused on delivering dividends to our citizens and our communities. Beyond our bilateral horizon, we project the commitment in our continued adherence to ASEAN centrality, which we will have the opportunity to reaffirm at the special summit between ASEAN and Australia in Melbourne next week. Beyond the region, we project this commitment too in our partnership and active leadership on the international stage. We collaborate closely with Australia to strengthen international security and universal adherence to international humanitarian law. I salute Prime Minister Albanese's personal commitment to our vision of a world free of nuclear weapons. It is a commitment that is shared by all peoples of Southeast Asia, with those of Australia and the Pacific Island states. Through the treaties of Bangkok and Rarotonga, our two regions serve as pockets of freedom from these destructive weapons. Within the ambit of the ASEAN Regional Forum and the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, our two countries are champions of nuclear disarmament and advocates for nuclear risk reduction. In the context of emerging technologies such as autonomous weapon systems and of new frontiers such as outer space and cyberspace, there is much room for our two countries to work together. Our collaboration in the United Nations demonstrates the need to continue to build bridges and to forge consensus towards decisive multilateral solutions. We cannot allow geopolitics to paralyze global governance. Now more than ever, we need multilateralism to work. This is particularly important given the scope of global cooperation needed to address our most pressing vulnerability, one that threatens the very survival of our peoples, one that threatens our very future. I speak, of course, of climate change. My country accepts its part in our collective responsibility. My administration is committed to accelerating our just, affordable, sustainable, and inclusive energy transition towards carbon neutrality. The Philippines has the potential to be a net carbon sink, absorbing more carbon dioxide than we emit. Yet, we are one of the most climate vulnerable countries in the world, ranking first in the 2023 World Risk Index. This glaring disproportion between our share of responsibility and our vulnerability reflects an injustice that must be corrected. Developed countries must do more, and they must do it now. Our past successes should inspire us to forge ahead in building the future to which we aspire. For the Philippines, we continue to see that future in our identity as Asians and as members of the Pacific family. Together with our Asian neighbors, and in that group I include Australia, we continue to work for a regional community that empowers all of our citizens. As Asians, we are committed to fulfilling our region's promise as a global engine of growth and in remaining true to our shared value of mutual respect, our shared desire to flourish through our diversity. As part of the Pacific, we carry in our very DNA the heritage of seafaring civilizations that span two oceans. This manifests in the high regard our cultures place on family, on community, and on the environment. In Australia, we see not only a strong democracy, but an indispensable part of our Pacific community, a permanent stakeholder in the future of Asia, and a reliable supporter of ASEAN centrality. In Australia, we see a natural partner in our efforts to defend, to preserve, to uphold our open, inclusive, and rules-based international order, to ensure that it remains governed by international law and informed by the principles of equity and justice. In Australia, we see a lifelong friend with whom we have endured joint sacrifices, reveled in our shared victories, and now pursue common aspirations. All this inspires confidence in the future of our strategic partnership. This confidence is shared not only by our two governments, but also by our two peoples. We see this in the face of the almost 35,000 Filipino students who choose Australian schools to pursue their respective endeavors, the fifth largest foreign student population in Australia. We see this too in the nearly 30,000 Australians who work and live with us and have chosen to call the Philippines their home. We see this more importantly in the spirit of bayanihan and mateship that defines our relationship. Our mateship brought Australians to Tacloban, my mother's hometown, to bring relief in the aftermath of Super Typhoon Haiyan in 2013. Our bayanihan brought closure and peace to the families of the gallant Australians that perished in the sinking of the Montevideo Maru in 1942. And this is the same spirit that now brings our sailors, our airmen and soldiers together, shoulder to shoulder, in defending our rights and in securing our common future. For when the Southern Cross met the Pearl of the Orient, a friendship blossomed, withstood the test of war, and flourished through the changes brought about by a world in flux. Looking ahead, I am confident that Filipinos and Australians will remain steadfast partners, unyielding and uncompromising in our shared values, and energized as we gird ourselves to work together in the spirit of bayanihan and of mateship. Thank you and mabuhay.
You just heard Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. addressing the Australian Parliament. Still on Philippine President Marcos Jr.'s state visit to Australia, at least 3 agreements were signed during the state visit of the Philippine Chief Executive, where he addressed the Parliament of Australia. The President reported the signing of the agreements covering the issues of maritime domain, cyber and critical technology, and effective implementation of the respective competition laws and policies of the 2 countries. On the maritime domain, the Philippines is keen to enhance cooperation in order to strengthen the civil-military cooperation, promote international law and rules-based international order, safeguard the marine environment and cultural heritage, enhance defense engagements, and establish avenues for dialogue among relevant agencies of the Philippines and Australia. The Philippines also looks forward to sharing information and best practices with Australia in terms of cyber and critical technology, conducting capacity building, promoting a secure digital economy, and achieving greater understanding of the application of international law norms in cyberspace. The cooperation on effective implementation of the respective competition laws and policies of the Philippines and Australia is one of the practical ways of the 2 countries to strengthen economic relations through the sharing of best practices and the conduct of capacity building on matters involving merger regulations, competition laws, and investigative techniques relevant to implementing competition laws. The 3 agreements signed during President Marcos' visit to Canberra added to the existing agreements signed last year during the visit of Prime Minister Albanese to the Philippines in September last year. The 3 agreements signed between the Philippines and Australia was announced by a joint statement from both heads of state.
Australia sees the Philippines as a central player and a crucial partner for us in Southeast Asia. So it's great to welcome you here today on your first official visit to Australia as President of the Philippines. And it was a special honour to host you for your historic address to Parliament. Australia is honoured to count the Philippines as a close friend and strategic partner. For more than 3/4 of a century, our nations have been bound by strategic trust and mutual cooperation. Our ties are strengthened by warm and close personal connections, including through the over 400,000 Australians with Filipino heritage who make a wonderful contribution to modern multicultural Australia. As I said to last year's Shangri-La Dialogue and to the Lowy Institute in December, my government backs Australia's agency in and contribution to our region. Our foreign policy and national security depends on investing in our capabilities, but also investing in our relationships. Hosting President Marcos today is a great example of us putting this into action, and I also very much welcome the First Lady. President Marcos and I have had very productive discussions focused on driving forward our close collaboration as strategic partners. We are ambitious for what we can achieve together, and I'm pleased that we are working actively to build a peaceful region where international law is respected and waterways are open for trade. I'm pleased that with our new MOU on enhanced maritime cooperation, which we've signed today, we'll collaborate even more closely to promote our shared vision for the region, including in civil maritime security, marine environment protection, maritime domain awareness and promoting respect for international law. We'll also continue our maritime cooperative activities as regional partners committed to doing our part to sustain peace and stability in our region. We also discussed strengthening cooperation on cyber and critical technology, and will work together to promote the open and secure use of cyberspace through a new MOU which we have signed today. We've also signed a new MOU between our competition commissions to enhance cooperation on competition law and policy, highly relevant issues in both of our countries given the cost of living pressures that our people are facing. Australia's economic future lies with Southeast Asia, and we're determined to drive growth in trade and investment in line with our Southeast Asia Economic Strategy to 2040, which I launched at the ASEAN Summit last year, and that will be a focus point of the Business Summit on the sidelines of the ASEAN Summit that's being held in Melbourne next week. The Philippines is one of our fastest growing economies in our region, and there's great potential to deepen our two-way trade and investment links. To give just one example, this week the Philippines-based company, International Container Terminal Services, will open a new $235 million expansion to its facilities at the Port of Melbourne. This will bring these investments in Melbourne to $1 billion, a welcome example of the opportunity available to grow our economic ties. Australia and the Philippines share a vision for an open, stable and prosperous region where disputes are settled through agreed rules, norms and institutions. ASEAN centrality is critical to this, and it will be a great honour to host all the leaders of Southeast Asia in Melbourne next week for the ASEAN Australia Special Summit. This will mark 50 years of dialogue between Australia and ASEAN, and is another example of my government investing in our relationships and prioritising this, our region. Deepening Australia's engagement with Southeast Asia continues to be a priority. We're invested in and committed to this region. For many years, Australians spoke about the tyranny of distance from the great economies and markets of the United States of America and Europe. Now we speak about the proximity of opportunity. Located as we are at the heart of the fastest growing region of the world in human history. And that presents such an opportunity for us. Our strategic partnership with the Philippines is a key pillar of the commitment to building those relationships in our region. And I look forward to continuing to work with the Philippines and with President Marcos to meet the challenges of our times and realise our shared vision for an open, peaceful, stable and prosperous region. Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Today, Prime Minister Albanese and I had a very engaging discussion on a wide range of opportunities and issues under the ambit of our strategic partnership. I certainly are very honored on a personal and an official level for the invitation as guest of the Australian government, and therefore the opportunity to personally convey our commitment to this partnership and to reiterate Filipino friendship. Our conversations centered on ways to maximize the enhanced status of relations between our two countries, including on defense, maritime cooperation, non-traditional security concerns, trade and investment, development cooperation, multilateral collaboration, and people-to-people linkages. Defense and security remains a key area of cooperation between the Philippines and of Australia. We look forward to amplifying our joint activities and the capacity building efforts in this regard. On economic cooperation, we anticipate greater bilateral economic cooperation that will allow us to withstand shocks, to be resilient against economic coercion, and to provide an enabling environment for our respective businesses and labor markets to further flourish under the ambit of this strategic relationship and partnership. At the same time, we look forward to our robust people-to-people ties to drive greater cooperation between our two countries and our peoples. The significant Filipino diaspora, the fifth largest immigrant community here in Australia, has contributed significantly to the economic and cultural well-being, not only of our country, but yours as well. It is also an undeniable indicator of Australia's openness to embrace a globalized and interconnected world. Both the Philippines and Australia welcome future consultations and dialogues as we explore and map the uncharted waters that can bring in new opportunities for a closer and stronger relationship between our two countries. To this end, I had earlier the distinction of delivering my address to the Australian Parliament, an honor befitting a partnership between two equal sovereign states and a vital opportunity for the Philippines to express our vision for this cordial and warm friendship. I had the opportunity to expound on the critical role of peace and security in our continued march towards prosperity. And as mentioned in my speech, and as discussed with the Prime Minister, both Philippines and Australia emphasized the importance of observing and promoting the rules-based order governed by international law and informed by the principles of equity and of justice. Stability in the Indo-Pacific region is of utmost priority for both our countries. The Philippines recognizes Australia's indisputable role as a regional stabilizer. As a flourishing democracy and a staunch advocate of the rules-based order and rule of law, Australia responsibly discharges its economic and strategic capacity, thereby sustaining the regional framework that has allowed us to experience unprecedented growth and peace. The Philippines fully adheres to the same set of values, making our two countries natural partners in the region. As we are situated in such a dynamic regional security environment, I would like to assure our Australian friends that the Philippines will continue to partner with Australia in promoting predictability of actions in the international arena. The Philippines is fully ready to continue upholding its commitments as your strategic partner and as one of your oldest friends in the region. In the same vein, we recognize Australia's steadfast commitment to positive engagement with the ASEAN region, and we wish Australia success in its upcoming hosting of the special summit to commemorate the 50th anniversary of ASEAN-Australia dialogue relations. I look forward to the active participation of the Philippines in the 4 important thematic tracks of the special summit. The 3 agreements exchanged today shall enhance information sharing, capability building, and interoperability between our relevant government agencies in the maritime domain and maritime environment, cyber and critical technology, and competition law. The 3 agreements add to more than 120 agreements that our two countries have signed through the decades. And these are in various fields, including defense cooperation, air services, education, research, scientific and cultural cooperation, amongst others. The Prime Minister and I both agreed to continue to look for ways and to explore every option possible to bring our countries closer than ever, and collectively, with optimism and a hopeful outlook, to be a force for good, unity, stability, and prosperity in our region. Thank you.
You just heard the joint statement made by Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. and Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. And with that, we wrap up another edition of Front and Center. You can watch this program over Radio Pilipinas World Service via Facebook page live broadcast. Just access our Facebook page, Radio Pilipinas World Service. You can also catch every Front and Center programs over our YouTube channel. Just type in your YouTube browser, Radio Pilipinas World Service. The program, Front and Center, and the programs of Radio Pilipinas World Service can also be listened to the following shortwave frequencies: 12.010 MHz, 15.640 MHz, and 17.820 MHz. Together with our producer, Mr. Erwin Peñano, and technical personnel, Milo Jonella, this is your host, Rey Sampang. Join us again in another edition of Front and Center next time. Mabuhay and love the Philippines.
You have just heard and watched Front and Center. Front and Center. Join us again for another edition here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service. Front and Center.